So this video is on winter resting a Dendrobium. And this one's kind of hard for me to do because not all the Dendrobiums are the same. Some need a winter rest and some don't. So I'm going to cover a bunch of different species of Dendrobiums and how I winter rest them. So this right here is Dendrobium a phylum. It is a deciduous Dendrobium, so you can see it has no leaves right now. So each year it grows a new growth, and then when winter comes, all the leaves fall off, and then it's naked. So you see these old canes, they're naked, and then in the spring, it will put out buds and flowers. And this year it only put out flowers on the new growth, but in some years it will actually put out buds on the old growth as well. It didn't this year. So these, they're starting to get there about being perhaps too old to stay, but you can check them. They're not brown yet, but they are getting sort of soft. So if you look at the base of the canes, they're green. And so I have not removed them. I mean, like this right here, this is not a root. This is a really old cane. This cane could come off. That cane is old. But it will bloom off old canes. So this is a phylum. And I'm now going to go over a bunch of Dendrobiums that are sort of like a phylum, or they look like a phylum. And you think you're going to want to treat them like a phylum, and then you shouldn't. So a phylum, what I do is it gets what I call a hard winter rest. I try to keep the humidity around it around 50%. And then I will use a spray bottle and I will mist the moss right here, maybe once a week, but I don't water it. If you water it, it doesn't bloom. So you have to really hard winter rest Dendrobium phylum. This right here is Dendrobium anosmum, also known as the Honohono orchid. And it looks a lot like a phylum. And this does not get a winter rest. So if you rest it in the winter, it doesn't bloom. This wants water all winter, even though it looks very similar and it's not deciduous. So behind it right here, this one right here, this is another phylum that I have. And this one's in moss. And I watered it all winter. It kept its leaves, and you can see it has flower buds right there. Whereas this one, I didn't water enough, right? It has some leaves, but not a lot. It's mostly kikis, and it has not bloomed. And I'm going to probably take it out of this hanger, which, you know, I thought at first, hey, it needs to dry out, but no, it doesn't. It wants to stay very moist all winter in order to bloom. So that's a anosmum. Looks sort of like a phylum, but it's not the same. It's not deciduous, right? It also gets a 50% humidity, but it wants to be watered like normally. So I water it once a week if I can remember, or I sit it in a tray of water in moss. Stays wet all winter in order to bloom. So this right here is Dendrobium Loddigesii, and you can see it has a lot of kikis on it. So Loddigesii wants to be in a humid environment, like 50%, 60% humidity, but it doesn't want to be watered, and it wants to be warm. So if it gets too cold, it doesn't do very well. It's not supposed to be deciduous. It should keep its leaves. Mine has lost a bunch of its leaves because it got a little bit too cold. And then if you water it too much, Loddigesii will kiki. So here, look. So you see how it has all the kikis like this? It kikied. But if you don't water it too much, it will bud, right? So in previous years, I have watered this too much and I have too many kikis on it. So you can see this one right here, there's no kikis. Right here, this cane, no kikis. but it has buds because this winter I got the right amount of humidity for it, 50 to 60%, more humid, less water. I do give it a light misting about once a month with 50% humidity. Next to it is Dendrobium Jenkinsii. All right, so this does not want a winter rest. So for this one to bloom, so I was treating it like Aggregatum because it makes flowers like Aggregatum, but it's different. So this wants to stay very humid, 70 to 80%, or you want to water it once a week, twice a week, and it will bloom for you. I do have some trouble in keeping all the buds. So you see some of these buds are in the process of blasting, right? Here's buds that are forming all the way. And it wants to be watered all the time. It doesn't want to dry out. So if it dries out, you get less blooming. So I get my best blooming on this if I stick this on a fogger and I let it stay very moist all winter. It wants to like be fogged, you know, very high humidity, but then it wants all the water to fall off. It really likes being mounted. It doesn't want to have sort of sitting in water, but it kind of wants to be bathed in moisture all the time. And it also wants to be warm. So it and Loddigesii both want to be warm. This winter resting phylum wants to be cooler. It wants to be 50, 55 degrees. And then finally, well, not finally, I actually have some more after this, but Dendrobium aggregatum, which I confused with Jenkinsii when I first started. So this wants the hard winter rest. It's not deciduous, it keeps its leaves, but it wants very, very bright light, as bright as you can give it, and it doesn't want to be watered. This right here is another Dendrobium aggregatum that I just got from the person who was getting out orchids, and he watered it all winter, and he didn't give it enough light, and he says that he has never gotten it to bloom. So I brought it over here so we could compare the leaves between it and my Jenkinsii. So you can see there's the top. Look at how much darker his leaf is than my leaf, right? So mine's a little bit sunburnt because I've given it like way as much sun as it can get. So it's much lighter, and they're similar in size, but this doesn't bloom, the one on the left, because it got water all winter and you shouldn't water it. So this, at most, I give it a little spritz in its moss once a month. I try to keep it cool. It's right next to my windows, and it's near the front of my grow area, so it gets the brightest light possible. Finally, finally, I have here two dendrobiums that make like clusters of blooms. In my hand is Dendrobium farmeri, and over here is Dendrobium Thyrsiflorum. And Thyrsiflorum needs a hard winter rest. Now, it's not actually deciduous. So you can see I have a lot of old canes on it. And if you keep the ambient humidity high enough, so if I can get it like 70% ambient humidity on this, it will keep its leaves. If you drop it down to about 50% ambient humidity, the leaves will fall off. And if you don't water it in the winter, then come around April, it will do this and put out long, like, I think of them as like pineapple shaped flower spikes. And you can see here that it is definitely blooming off the old canes. This right here, farmeri, right, also not deciduous, and this wants to be watered all winter in order to bloom. So it wants to be very moist. And so even though they make flower spikes that are very similar, they have two completely different growth habits. So I should also say that my Thyrsiflorum is in semi-hydroponics. And The real trick with these orchids that need a winter rest is that they want to have an environment that has high humidity, but not to be watered frequently. So I'm going to water them in the winter. It's like once a month, or it's a light spritz with the spritz bottle once a week. And that is how I get them to bloom. They don't get lower than 55, maybe 50 at night in the winter. And my grow area, usually in the dark days of December, averages around 70, 75 degrees during the day.